So the FM has spoken, and now it's time to decode what the budget 2024 had for business and industry. We have with us today MS Money, partner Deloitte India. Uh, Also joining us, we have Ajay Srivastava, co-founder GTRI, Rishi Shah, partner Economic Grant Northern Bharat, and we'll have Anil Bharadwaj, Secretary General FISME, joining us very soon. So let's get some initial reactions as to what you think the budget was, starting with you, Mr. Money.
So I think to put initial reactions in perspective, we got to understand that over a period of time, the budget is not as important an economic event in the country's history as it used to be, say, some 10 years back. This is because of two reasons. One reason is the fact that there aren't too many changes required in the tax legislation now. And the changes that are required in the tax legislation keep happening throughout the year. It's not something that happens only in one shot during the budget. So over a period of time, while the expectations from budget are always very, very high, that there will be a beneficial tax regime for certain kind of people, there will be more duty concessions on customs duty front, the GST will see a lot of changes. There are a lot of expectations built around budget in the run up to the budget. But progressively, the budget is becoming lesser important in the economic calendar of the country over a period of time. And I would say rightfully so, because businesses have to operate throughout the year. Unlike the past, where the budget announcement would be preceded by a stock out of some products and the demand for some products after the budget, there would be hoarding of projects during the excise duty days because there would be a rate change. Those days are behind us now, rightfully, so. But keeping this perspective in mind, in the run up to the budget, there were some expectations in terms of a directional clarity on GST. That directional clarity to some extent has been fulfilled in course of the budget. We will certainly discuss about that a little later. There was also an expectation in terms of customs duty concessions for some sectors, which are part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat plan. That also to some extent seems to be fulfilled. While we will need to read the fine print, because very often the notifications that come after the budget are really something that we need to pour into and detail into, and therefore it's always better to read the budget, talk of the budget after reading the notification. We will have to wait and watch for that. But overall, I would say a budget, since I didn't expect too many things in the budget, I would say my expectations are largely fulfilled.
Right. Ajay, coming to you, what do you think? Initial reactions of the budget?
It was the seventh budget of FM, and she looked totally in command and confident. She knew her stakeholders, and there was something for all the major stakeholders in this budget, which means farmers, youth, women, middle class, and the sector-wise, if we talk about agriculture, manufacturing, services, then for employment, skilling. So major portions of the budget were devoted to reading the allocations for these and many more stakeholders. So there was something for everyone important in this budget. But if I have to make one observation, I'll say I would have loved, in addition to this, if more time would have been devoted to discussing the deeper structural changes needed in our economy. Most part of the budget was just reading of the allocation numbers. So that's all from my side.
Right. Rishi, coming to you, what's your view?
So, interestingly, this was a little more, this was a more cautious budget as what I was expecting. I think the government had a little bit room to spend more than what it has actually come out with the, fiscal deficit, as they've claimed at 4.9%, they've taken a more aggressive path on the consolidation front, and that is something that maybe could have been delayed. But it's a prudent macroeconomic sort of step which will keep global investors happier, because you're bringing down your fiscal deficit at a time when the economy is growing, at close to the level that it should be, around 7.5. Largely, I would say that, over the last 10 years, if you look at the budgets, it's becoming more of an account it's an accounting exercise rather than, a large policy announcement sort of stage. And the direction in which they're thinking, and then the policy making sort of follows throughout the year. So that's the way I'm looking at it. It's a more of a cautious budget, but from pure macroeconomic stability standpoint, it's a good budget.
Right. So cautious budget. Anil Bharadwaj, what do you think? What are your views?
Uh, I feel this is a functional budget and is a no surprise budget. And I think this is what the budget should always be, is prudent accounting. And as I think rightly said, that, it shows that where it wants to go, the way for the country, Indian economy. And also they very clearly spelled out the areas they would like to focus, whether it is employment, whether it is MSMEs, whether it is farmers. So I think the clarity is there. There are enough resources also allocated. Overall, I see that, it's a mature budget, and I think we welcome it.
Right. Mani, coming to you. Let's get a little bit more specific now. What are the hits according to you in this budget?
I would say that the largest part of budget was mentioned in a very small way when the finance minister started. The first point which I noticed was that this year, the finance minister's part B of the speech, which typically starts with direct taxes and then moves to indirect taxes, this year a departure was made and the speech started with indirect taxes. Now, does this indicate a shift in the thought process that over a period of time, indirect taxes are going to be more important as part of the tax collection compared to direct taxes? We will have to wait and see, because while indirect taxes are regressive in nature and income tax is more progressive in nature, indirect taxes typically get embedded in the price and value of the goods and services that we buy. Whereas with direct tax, it's visible, and therefore the pain of paying direct taxes is always much more. So the fact that the budget speech started part B by talking of indirect taxes was in itself to me a welcome sign, which may indicate the shape of things to come in future. We are going to rely more on indirect tax collections in future. Now, in indirect taxes, again, the budget, as we all know, typically does not have too many pronouncements on GST. And that is largely because GST is governed by the GST Council, which is where the state's consent has to be taken on all the key proposals. It is not something which the central government can do on its own as part of the union budget. Having said that, in the initial part of the speech, the finance minister said very categorically that GST has been a success, and a few reasons were listed down, including the fact that it has broadened the tax base, it has improved ease of doing business, it has reduced complications, it has reduced cascading. With that, the most important part of what she said was that we will be rationalizing the GST rate further, and we will be expanding the scope of the GST. So to me, these two phrases are very important, because that is something which many of us have been waiting for a period of time. Because having completed 7 years of GST, to me, it is illogical that even today we have petroleum products outside the purview of GST. And therefore, what the finance minister possibly alluded to by saying that we will be expanding the scope of GST was to give a signal that in the forthcoming GST Council meetings, we will be seeing inclusion of petroleum products, possibly in a phased manner. We may include natural gas first, followed by aviation turbine fuel, and finally come to petrol diesel, maybe with an interval of time, depending on how we works. But the fact that expanding the scope of GST was mentioned initially, to me, is very, very significant. We'll have to obviously wait for the detailing in the GST Council meeting. There was also mention of rationalizing GST further. And that again, in the 7th year of GST, has become a bit of an imperative, because we have a 5%, a 12%, an 18%, a 28%. These are the 4 standard rates that we have on GST. We also have GST rate for special products. So precious metal, we have a rate of 3%. We also have a rate of compensation cess over and above the 28% on certain products. When GST started, it was not intended to have so many rates, because one of the objectives of GST is to simplify the rate structure to say there can possibly one mean rate at which most products are taxed, one rate for merit goods, which are the essential goods, and one rate for the sin goods. But typically, any GST structure, even for a very complex country like ours, with a basket of goods and services, different consumption models across the country, it can't be more than three. But we have many, many more rates. So when there was a mention by saying we are going to rationalize GST further, I think she was alluding to the fact that in the subsequent GST Council meetings, we are going to see some discussion on rates. We have to bear in mind that there is an empowered committee of state finance ministers, which is already tasked with looking at rate rationalization in GST. Possibly that report will get taken up in the coming GST Council meetings. And maybe a few months from now, the movement to having fewer rates in GST, together with inclusion of petroleum products in a phased manner, we start. I think this was, to me, the biggest takeaway, although this whole thing was contained in possibly one sentence at the beginning of part B of the speech, but that is what I read into it. There were, of course, changes in customs, which we can discuss maybe a little later.
Interesting. Rishi, coming to you, what do you think of the hits?
I think again, I won't really call it the hits as I think it was a budget which was broadly on expected lines. You saw, expenditure on the social side of things. So like, expenditure in the Manrega scheme, that allocation has been increased. You saw a lot of, talk of social expenditure in general. You saw the talk of increasing employment, giving more internship opportunities. So they tried to at least attack it in a meaningful way by giving some kind of employment incentives to the larger firms, to the smaller firms, so that, hiring and especially giving opportunities to first-time job seekers, that is incentivized. I think those were, for me, those are important elements that the budget highlighted. But as I say that, when you look at the finer print, when you look at how will this be implemented, how easy will it be for them, for the companies to actually take advantage of this, is something that needs to be looked into. So broadly, that is for me, that those were the key aspects. Otherwise, they've talked about the numbers seem credible. I mean, the nominal GDP number has been estimated at around 11.5%, which is par for the course with around 4.5% of inflation. You're looking at a real growth rate for GDP of around 7.5%, which is absolutely in line with broader projections across the globe and maintains India as the fastest growing economy. So broadly, I said that, really no big sort of announcements in the budget, but that's to be expected. It's like so I think one of the other panelists also, it's a functional budget. It's a statement of accounts. So yeah, but the tonality, if you see, it is towards going a little more socialistic in nature by giving some sops for employment and otherwise. So that's my interpretation. Sorry, I think you're on mute.
Ajay, coming to you. What do you think are the hits in this budget for you?
So I loved 4 ideas presented in this budget. First, about the 3 schemes, employment-linked schemes. That means government is recognizing the need for employment-linked schemes, and it's up to the officers, the bureaucrats now, to create the framework of such a scheme where people can really benefit. Unlike many of our PLI schemes, where the design is so complicated that people are not able to take benefit of it. So I loved the idea of employment-linked scheme. And I hurriedly read the figure of $25 billion allocation. I may be wrong here, but if that's correct, it's equal to the existing PLI scheme. But I need to be corrected if it's not true. Second, the announcement about the import duty cuts on gold and silver and platinum. The current basic custom duty on gold, silver, platinum is about 10%. And agriculture infrastructure cess on these is 5%. So total import duty is about 15% on these things. So now I have to see the custom notification to see whether government has cut this total duty, brought down total duty from 15% to 6%, or it has merely cut the duty from 10% to 6%. Only looking at the custom notification will be able to, will be able to surely tell this. But whatever is the cut, the arbitrage, we have seen in the last 2 or 3 months, a lot of gold and silver, which we never intended that should come through Dubai via our India UAE FTA. A lot of it was coming, and many of us felt that much of it is not intended to come. So this duty arbitrage reduction will put a break on some of those imports. So that it's most welcome. Second, government has brought down the tariffs on mobile phone from 20% to 15%. I think it's a sheer in confidence government has done this, because mobile phone, we have become a big exporter, and our local production has reached about $49 billion. So I think it's a show of confidence. Okay, we don't need so much higher duty wall. We need a slightly lower duty wall. And then I absolutely love the idea of setting up 100 industrial parks, plug and play ready in different cities. I wish the people working on it make it a reality. It's very much needed. Whenever I travel to China, I always see a 10-story building where it's ready for plug and play. You go, investor goes there and start manufacturing by just bringing their equipment. No approvals needed, nothing. Here we take years for setting up all these things. So these things are very, very welcome. I only feel that these should be done in a very meticulous and serious way. And fourth is, the announcement that government will be reviewing the custom tariff structure. Today we have more than 33 structures, 33 type of tariff rates, and I'm not counting the specific duty rate. They run into more than 100. And then GST is bringing more items to GST. So all these things are most welcome. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Bharadwaj, you must be happy there were a lot of announcements for MSMEs today.
Oh, yes, of course. She responded some of the major irritants that MSMEs were facing, in particular about the third-party rating, or BLR rating as it is called. And now she has announced that ultimately the public sector banks will build their own in-house capabilities, and the third-party rating would not be necessary and would be made redundant. That's quite a bit of saving, and also, a lot of harassment also they used to face through the hands of credit rating agencies. Then there has been a very clear announcement on credit guarantee scheme, specifically for purchase of machinery. So short-term machinery purchases, if money is required, that would be guaranteed through that. And I think the allocation also, the threshold also is 100 crore, which is, I think, would be serving larger or small and the medium enterprises in particular. And that is the segment that requires technology upgradation to a large extent. So I think this is very, very timely and important. On SMA, special mention account, FISMA has been leading this campaign to review the special mention account. She has responded partially, at least from the government's perspective, that they would be creating a fund to come out to the rescue of stressed units that are flagged under SMA, part 1 or part 2. But I think there are more specific interventions would be needed from Reserve Bank of India, because one of the major issue is that, the local level official, or you can say the last mile manager in the bank, is no more empowered. And even if silly things have happened, he has no power in his hands to correct the things. To give you an example, like, if the payment is delayed by just a day due to any reason, it could be holiday and the money could not be transferred or whatever, it's very automatic and very, can say, state-executed system, rather Excel sheet-based system, where automatically things get flagged, accounts are frozen. So our unit, which is working perfectly well for 30 years, just because of this one day delay, his account could be classified as a special mention account, and a lot of other problems come into the picture. So she has responded partially. We'll continue to press upon the Reserve Bank of India to fully address some of the issues that we had raised. Finance Minister has also very generously increased the Mudra loan threshold from 10 to 20, which I think would be very helpful for the smaller, or you can say the micro enterprises. But what is very, very important and a signal also is, again, that we have been pressing, that, the current system of micro, small and medium enterprises is such that medium enterprises are specifically excluded from the support agenda. So in the trades platform, while announcing that, the threshold now has come from 500 to 250 crores, so there will be more companies that would be listed per force. But what is important is that, medium enterprises are allowed to take advantage of the trades platform system. I think this is very important. I think this gesture needs to be replicated in other MSME support programs. Then only we can see a gradual progression from micro to small and to medium enterprises. There are several other announcements. I don't know how much time I have. Like SIDBI, more branches. I mean, we have been asking for a MSME bank. So government has chosen the middle path that let the SIDBI reach out to all the major industrial clusters. And they have given at least 3 years, within 3 years, that they will be almost in all the major industrial areas, industrial clusters. And on e-commerce hubs, this is very, very important. And this was another demand that we had been making. So there's a lot of talk that, we need to promote MSMEs for e-commerce, and we should make them e-commerce ready. But one major, you can say, problem they used to face is, for example, if you are exporting to US. So naturally, a US buyer would not wait for 45 days for his shipment to come through the land route or also sea route. And if it comes through the air freight, naturally, it would be economically unviable. So typically what happens is that, all these companies keep their large warehouses within the countries where they want to do business. So if somebody is interested in exporting to US, they have to have a warehouse. Either it would be from the platform only, like if it is, for example, Amazon will have hundreds of warehouses. So you'll have to buy the warehouse. And what was becoming is that it is very, very expensive, because 100 of things you have to keep in stock in those warehouses and pay up the rentals. So government has responded by can say proposing that there could be a mechanism developed, and end-to-end logistics company can come in private-public partnership, and government is perhaps going to support them financially or through other means. I think that would be really helpful. I think that is needed, particularly in Europe and in USA. So there were several other things that have done in the maybe realms of reforms, but I would stop at this moment.
Right. So no budget is perfect. So while we've talked about the hits, what are the misses, Mr. Mani?
I wouldn't call it a miss, but I would say in terms of, the expectations that were there from the budget, and possibly some of the items which could have been taken up, in the budget. We will never know why they were not taken up, or is it just a timing issue where maybe they'll get taken up during the other part of the year without waiting for the next budget. One was in respect of the production linked incentive schemes, the PLI schemes, as we know. They have been a very big source of success for various sectors. And one of the expectations was that there will be a PLI announced for many other sectors as well, which are not covered. Equally, it was expected that in respect of some of the PLI related sectors, the eligibility date would get extended. So the period would get extended, beyond. There was also an expectation on PLI that the amounts which were allocated for various sectors would be increased so that more people can come in. Because PLI is coming in a manner where it is leading to a lot of growth in exports for certain sectors which in the past did not have that kind of support. We also have to bear in mind that many of the other measures to support exporters in the past have over a period of time fallen foul of the WTO regulations. And therefore, many of those incentives and scripts cannot be given now to exporters. So how does one go about and ensure that the exporters ecosystem takes care of all the additional costs they have to incur because they are manufacturing in India. PLI was one such way of incentivizing exporters to set up greenfield manufacturing, export from that manufacturing, and make it more competitive for them. Because of the fact that the initial round of PLI on various sectors has largely been successful, there was an expectation that there would be more sectors added to the PLI. The allocation to the existing sectors would be increased, and the sunset clause or the sell-by date for the PLI would also get extended. We didn't see any announcement on that in the budget. But as I said earlier, possibly this is something which can be done outside the budget as well. So maybe when the finance bill is taken up for discussion in Parliament, this will be one of the things that will get discussed. Maybe it will happen after the finance bill is passed. But that was one expectation that many of us were having. The other expectations on the custom duty front was that over a period of time, we have not seen too much of rationalization in terms of the customs duty rates overall. Now, the customs duty rates are part of the customs tariff, and for an importer or for an exporter to determine the precise tariff in terms of which they are importing, to determine the rate, to read the chapter-wise exemption notifications is quite difficult even now. Some simplification in respect of those was expected. To some extent, this expectation has been fulfilled because there is a customs tariff rationalization which has been announced. We hope that will be done within 3 months or 6 months of being announced, because the need of the hour today is that in respect of both importers and exporters, let the customs duty structure be simple. Let it not be too complicated. Let there be fewer rates applicable. Let there be fewer chapter-wise exemptions which are there. Let there be fewer chapter notes to each customs tariff chapter. That is the overall expectation that most of the importers and exporters in the country, would have. One more aspect that would have been very nice to hear in budget is specifics in terms of what we are doing in respect of foreign trade. Because while the foreign trade policy remains a prerogative of the Commerce Ministry and the budget is a prerogative of the Finance Ministry, it would have been good to get a direction in terms of what is it that we are aiming through the foreign trade policy. Directionally, as I said, in GST also, it is not done only by the central government. GST Council is the body, but we heard some directional announcements in respect of GST. Similarly, a broad direction in terms of the foreign trade policy, which will be introduced in the coming months, would have been very good in the budget. But these were broadly areas which I thought could have been covered, but maybe will now get covered in the coming months.
Right. Ajay, coming to you, not too many things announced for exporters per se. What do you think partly misses?
Because budget is not the event for exports. Foreign trade policy is the event. As Mani is saying, there should be some directional announcement. So I would have loved, yesterday when economic survey was released, they hinted that for increasing our domestic value addition manufacturing, we should invite FDI. We should welcome FDI from China. So we should have a clear view on this. I mean, this is a very wild card idea. It may be correct for the country, it may not be correct. So we need a country level discussion on these things. So the FDI, and then how much integration with the global value chains we need. Are we willing to lower the our tariffs on the higher side? How can we become integrated with the value chains with higher tariffs? Then our trade costs are high. So we need a deeper discussions on all these things. And I think that will provide a direction to the foreign trade policy. But budget is not the place for this. I would say that I would have loved to see two things in the budget. One is about the PLI scheme. PLI scheme, it's a great design. We are covering 16 sectors, but only 3-4 sectors are performing well. Rest, we don't hear of much development in those sectors. And less than 10% of the money allocated has been utilized. So I think a recast PLI 2.0 is needed, is a need for the day now. We need those things. Second, about the e-commerce, e-commerce hubs are announced. That's very welcome decision. But there are 50 specific actions which government needs to take to promote e-commerce. For example, I'll give you only one example. For a packet of 4,000 rupees, banks will charge maybe 1,500 rupees. How a firm is going to survive international market? So we need to solve all those issues along with this. Of course, e-commerce, making e-commerce hubs, they are most welcome. So these are few thoughts
Right.
from my side. Thank you.
Right. Rishi, coming to you, what are some of the things that the FM could have done? We didn't hear too many things on, say, logistics, supply chain, even when it comes to agri, not too many things. I think a big, what I did not hear this year was about millets. So every year we've heard about millets, so no millets this time. What are the other things that the FM probably missed out?
So yeah, I mean, like I think what the other panelists have also pointed out, they were, maybe enough specifics weren't really given, but that's maybe by design rather than anything else. And it's important to understand how the budget or what is the overall philosophy of this administration, which has sort of come unchanged after 10 years. The idea broadly still remains that we will enable people to do their best. We will enable people to get to their, capability on what they can deliver. So you will see expenditure, a lot of expenditure going on the, infrastructure side, whether it's rural infrastructure, whether it's border infrastructure, all of those are value additive sort of, elements that will enhance the productive capacity. Because generally what you see is that, areas at the border tend to be at the lower, sort of segment on the income ladder. Now, having said that, of course, some of the things that we would have liked more is what is the direction of in terms of, in a new world with the new kind of geopolitics that's taking place. What kind of trade direction are we looking at? What happens to how are we looking to push manufacturing? Because those at the end of the day will continue to be some of our major, sort of job generators. While we are willing to give first time job seekers some help in terms of internships or maybe some help to the companies who employ them. But where is the impetus really going to come from for those companies to generate those jobs? Something around those lines was something which I believe which was missing. Of course, an expansion on the PLI that's been on the cards for the last, maybe last year's budget also, that was broadly expected, but didn't really come through. So that would have been, something which would have been important. And again, let sort of at the risk of reiteration there, that, how are we really going to upskill our youth? Right. I mean, on the social side of things, when we talk about skill augmentation, what is it really that we are looking to do there? Right. Because what are the future skills that we even have an understanding of that? So some directional input rather than just talking about expenditures there, that would have been much more. It would have given the markets and the general populace a lot more confidence on the way the government would sort of move ahead. I think this is more of a wait and watch kind of a budget. Let's see that, let's spend in the areas which will drive the capability of the population, and let's see, we still have some time, and then we will, maybe if we have to directly intervene, we do it later throughout the year, or maybe in the next budget. So I'm reading it as that right now.
Right. Anil, coming to you, what are some of the things that you would have actually wanted the FM to touch upon?
One thing I fully agree with other panelists also, that we were also expecting something on the PLI scheme. We, for example, proposed a sector-agnostic employment-based PLI scheme for MSMEs, or maybe a window in each of the existing PLI schemes. So I don't know, maybe the discussion, it might require a little more discussion, as somebody has also said that perhaps PLI needs to be relatively reviewed, that how much has been the experience so far. I mean, even if you look at the papers submitted yesterday in the economic survey, basically just 4 sectors are doing well. Rest of them are marginal. Five sectors are doing well. Otherwise, all the other sectors are not all picked up. So I think that was something that we missed. Apart from that, I think maybe that was the time, this year was the time when she could have announced something on how to improve uh, the governance of various schemes. See, what is happening is that because of the GST, now the central government as well as state governments, they have started having a lot of resources. I mean, they're through the taxation, they have enough resources now. But whether we are going to get the impact of those resources or allocation that are being made very generously, that is a moot point. But ultimately, because you through the GST and indirect taxes, you have been able to collect taxes so far not collected, and that remained in the pockets of the people. So now, because of the GST, there had been greater collection. So ultimately, this money is coming out from the pocket of people, and indirect taxes means from the relatively poor people also. But are we using that money to the best advantage that is going to give it to them or not? I think this is something is very, very important. And I think it's time that we should have done something about it.
Right. Mani, coming to and if you look at specifics like, say, customs, number of items where there has been some changes or the other, which includes medical and medical equipments, mobile phones. There's one interesting item of critical minerals and solar energy, especially when it comes to solar energy and solar panels. I think this is one area we've really struggled with, trying to figure out what to do with China. Again, critical minerals is something that we've struggled trying to figure out what to do there. How important are the changes that are announced today?
Okay, very good point. You make, Pran, on this. On critical minerals, I guess there are 25 critical minerals which have been announced where the customs duty is now exempt. It's not reduced, it's exempt. And while I haven't had time to go through the notification till now, based on what I saw, the sense is majority of these are required in connection with semiconductor manufacturing. And as most of us know, the government has been on an overdrive to encourage semiconductor manufacturing within the country. Quite a few facilities are already coming up. Now, if we have to do the backward integration of that manufacturing, these critical minerals become very, very important. And therefore, I can see that there is a bit of forward thinking which is going on in terms of how do we make a completely self-sufficient ecosystem for semiconductor manufacturing, keeping in mind that many of these critical minerals are only found in certain countries. They are not available throughout the world. They are available in very specific countries, very specific minerals, and the entire world depends on those mines for these minerals. So the customs duty exemption on these is, to me, a measure that the government is now thinking the next steps in terms of semiconductor manufacturing, some of the electronics good manufacturing, which has seen a success story till now within the country. How do we progress that further? So that is a very good area that they are focused upon. I was also saying that there is a exemption which is now given in respect of ferronickel. And ferronickel is one of the key items required for steel manufacturing. So steel industry over a period of time in the country has been very competitive. Over the last few years, our export of steel has gone up. And compared to, let's say, 10 years back, where we were a net importer of specialty steel, we are today a net exporter of specialty steel. So this is again the government thinking in terms of how can we expect a particular sector like steel sector to become even more, competitive. Leather and textile goods for exports have always been the focus year after year because in addition to the export potential that these sectors have, these are also highly employment intensive sectors. And therefore, whatever the government can do to promote these sectors in terms of customs duty concessions, in terms of other changes to make it easier for them to export, are part of all the budgets, normally. On solar panels, very interestingly, I think there were two changes. One was that the parts of solar panels will be exempted because large number of those parts need to be imported. But on certain items relating to solar panels, the customs duty exemption that existed in the past is not being extended, because on those items, we now have domestic manufacturing in the country, which is able to fulfill the demand. So where we are able to fulfill the demand by domestic manufacturing capability, there is no need to have a customs duty exemption. That only leads to cheap imports and imports flooding the market. But wherever we do not have domestic manufacturing capabilities in respect of solar panels, they have extended the customs duty concessions, and they have said that the components can also come without customs duty. So overall, when we deep dive into the customs duty changes, while the changes may not be too many in number, many of the changes seem to be very well calibrated changes, considering a particular sector, considering the ecosystem in that particular sector, considering the supply chain that we have in the country for that sector. It's basis a consideration of all of these that some of these decisions need to be taken. But we clearly need to wait for the fine print, wait for the notification, wait for the subsequent, activities to know exactly how it will impact and what has been exempted, to what extent, subject to what conditions. Because in the past, we have seen some exemption notifications where it would say the import is exempt for ABCD product, but then there would be a set of conditions. Some of those conditions would be very difficult to fulfill. So we'll have to wait and watch for that. But subject to that, a lot of thought seems to have gone into the customs duty changes that were announced today.
A lot of thought. So, Ajay, coming to you, another area which was which that found significant mention from the FM was around energy transition, climate. She even announced that they would do an energy audit of 60 clusters. Uh, how good are these measures, and do you think it's in the right direction?
They are absolutely in right direction, and we are few years behind most of the countries. There are at least over 100 countries which have already introduced carbon credit trading. So in this budget, it has been announced that we may be setting a system soon. So it's all in right direction. World is going in that direction. We have to preserve resources. We have to respect green. So it's perfectly in right direction.
Right. Just a follow-up question. I was going quickly over the numbers. One, especially when it comes to RODTEP, last year's estimate was around 15,669 crores. This year it's about at 16,575 crores. On the interest equalization scheme, last year the revised estimate was about 3,700 crore. This year it is pegged at 1,700 crore. Do you think these amounts are a little low on the lower side, especially when it comes to interest equalization?
In fact, if you compare these with the earlier MEIS scheme, which we discontinued in 2020, the budget at one time for MEIS scheme, the outgo was about 45,000 crore rupees. So today, drawback scheme plus RODTEP scheme plus ROS scheme for textiles plus interest equalization. Together, they must be around 35,000 crores. So the issue is two issues are there. One is interest equalization. Most of our MSME they don't have access to the credit. Most of them, exporters especially. So interest equalization, I feel it should be expanded to cover all products, and it's extended on year-to-year basis, month-to-month basis. It should be announced say for 5 years period. That's number one. And second is average rates of RODTEP or drawback are 2.5%, 3%, and they're both administered by customs. Why not merge the two schemes and give in one go in exporters account? Why ask them to file different applications online or offline? It's mostly online. So I feel more than the budget, it's ease of doing business. Merge the schemes, give for the same exports. If they're getting money from 2 or 3 schemes, they should be merged. And through simple accounting, the exporter should get the money. So I think, and if you talk about money, it's not incentive. Basically, government is refunding the taxes they have paid on making the export product, and that's what only WTO permits. That's why MEIS was withdrawn. So as custom duties are coming down on many products and GST, so we calculate these schemes are precisely of those nature. So there is nothing like low rates or high rates, except for interest equalization, which I feel should be more robust.
Right. Rishi, coming to you, a couple of announcements in agriculture as well. They talked about transforming agriculture research, release of new varieties, natural farming, missions on pulses and oil seeds, vegetable production and supply chains. I think the supply chains around agriculture is really one aspect that we need to strengthen. Has the FM and the budget done enough to strengthen the rural economy, farmers, agriculture?
I think it's definitely a good start. There has been an announcement of introducing new climate resilient yielding products in with the farmers, the seeds that they'll be supplied with. There are talks of doing a proper, some kind of a survey to understand what, which vegetables are getting produced in which areas, maintaining some kind of land registries for that. I think if you see for the last, I'm guessing at least 15-20 years now, vegetable inflation essentially in food prices spoils the complete the overall story for inflation in India. It remains volatile during this period, especially in the summers, and then leading up to the winter months. You see a lot of spikes, and which is the case this time around also. So doing some of these things, if you do introduce some weather resilient sort of crops into the mix, if you're better able to understand your own supply chains from production patterns and what should be produced, if you can even advise farmers on that what is most cost effective or maybe more profitable to them, giving them those kind of inputs. Broadly, I think those are positive steps. But again, I think the key there becomes the speed of execution and how much of an area in India are you really able to cover in this period of 1 year that there. I think this is a continuous exercise that needs to go on for some time for us to have a clear-cut understanding of where are these shocks emanating from, and broadly then create a policy framework which helps us avoid this. We've heard for the longest time that we need cold storage and all that. Clearly, the story is much more complicated than that. And how do we manage prices in a country with a large population, for whom we need to provide nutritious food, not just the calorie aspect of it, is something that needs closer monitoring. So yeah, these are good steps. But of course, a lot more can be done, and I'm hoping as the year goes by, you will see more, with a more dynamic leadership at the helm of affairs. You will see more coming out of particularly this area.
Right. Mr. Bharadwaj, coming to you, talking about a few specific announcements. For example, like the credit guarantee scheme for manufacturing sector. You know, Then also, the new assessment model for MSME credit. When it comes to the guarantee scheme, we already have something like a CGT MSE where, the limit is around 5 CR, but, anything over 10 lakhs, the banks, ask for collateral. Do you think, something like this might happen to, the manufacturing sector guarantee scheme? And also in the new, credit assessment model for banks, each bank will have, their own model of assessment. Do you think that will be a little opaque in the sense and maybe, open up things to subjectivity?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, that is what is required. But globally, this is what is followed also. For small and medium enterprises, nowhere you rely on the third-party credit rating agency for giving loans. The assessment is done by the bank, whose skin is in the game, not of the third-party, or you can say the third-party credit rating agency. As a matter of fact, this has been a great bone of contention between credit rating agencies and the banks also, and MSMEs on the other hand. And we have been pushing it that we can take a cue from what has happened, for example, in Europe, our counterparts will explain to us that, what the central bank has done is that, they have clubbed all the MSME loans to the retail loans, and they are not, you can say, rated individually, but as a portfolio. So similar thing could be done in India also. And there also, it is the banks that ultimately have developed their own credit rating or credit assessment models. And when the BLR rating was introduced actually in 2014 itself, the central bank has said in India that banks should develop their own credit assessment models. And it is surprising that almost 14 years have passed, and banks very easily passed on this responsibility to the rating agencies. And unfortunately, the sufferer has been the SMEs. Why? Because these rating agencies have done is that they used to earlier rate only the listed companies, where the issue used to be because the SEBI wanted the uninformed investors' interests to be served or to be taken care of. And the same models of the listed companies they have applied on typically closely held small companies, and with the result that none of them could even get BBB plus investment grade rating. So they had to face a lot of problems in terms of paying more interest rate, because the banks would be charging based on not so good rating, not the investment grade rating. And every year the cost would be 2 to 5 lakh rupees given to the credit rating agency. So I think this is a great reform. I think this is what the world is doing, and this is what should have been done in India also. So far as can say credit guarantee for specifically for machinery, I think this is needed. See, in the due course of the can say their operations, sometimes they require a specific machinery. Like everybody is talking about technological upgradation, and they might require investment of say 5 crore, 10 crore, 50 crore for purchase of machinery. Technology upgradation in the MSMEs is nothing but machines and know-how. So instead of going through the whole process of the loan application, etc., here it is very specific quid pro quo for the machine, and it is all ultimately covered through this credit guarantee, where the cost will be borne by the borrower, but they would be able to take advantage that it will be quickly done and it will be very specific. Let the details emerge, but I think this is what has been demanded by the sector. But there were other important developments that were announced. And one, I think, is mentioned also by Ajay is about the energy transition. Actually, we had suggested to the government, to the finance minister during the pre-budget consultation, that keeping in view of the developments like CBAM and other environmental regulations that are coming in the West, specifically in European Union, let's at least start focusing on the export clusters in India. So we gave a list of around 60 odd clusters that account for 80% of exports from MSMEs. And we said that let there be carbon intensity mapping, or you can say energy audits of clusters, of these 60 clusters. And I think it's good that government has now announced it, that they would be picking the cost of it. Secondly, simultaneously, they would also be providing finance for, can say, for adoption of cleaner forms of energy and implementation of energy efficient measures. This is again a very, very good reform that is required. But apart from that, one more thing I would like to highlight, if I have time, that housing is very, very important for MSMEs. See, if you take the cement and the steel out of a dwelling, almost 60 product categories are directly related to the MSME sector, whether it is glass, whether it is floor, whether it is wood, whether it is fan, electric appliances, etc., hardware in the bathroom. So this huge announcement of 2.3 lakh crores to be given in this year, in the next 5 years for housing, I think that would create lots of business opportunities for MSMEs. And I think this would create more employment opportunities through the MSMEs.
Right. Ask questions because we're running out of time, and it stays the same for everyone. We'll stay with you, Mr. Bhardwaj. Does the budget do enough to, increase private investment and help businesses? What are your takes?
I think yes, because government has started walking the talk, and they have not created surprises. Rather, the whole of the emphasis is in creating a system which is more, which is less opaque, which is transparent, and is, I think, like in the income tax announcement in the income tax also, that there is transparency and there is certainty. So I think to attract private investments, what you require is two things. One is the demand, which is there. The growth tells you that. And second is the certainty of the system, of the policies. I think, both the fronts, the government has done well.
Right. Ruchi, coming to you.
I think I mean, in all honesty, I think a little more could be done. Let me put my neck out and say that the fiscal deficit, I think they could have kept it at 5.1%, maintained continuity, maybe spent a little more on augmenting the productive capacity of the economy, whether it was through PLI schemes or maybe some other industrial level or skilling initiatives directly, and enhancing the productive capacity of the government. That's for me. Maybe that, and maybe one more, a little higher spend on the health outcomes for people. I think these two things could have seen somewhat more expenditure, and you could have had a more gradual pace of fiscal consolidation, over the next 1 or 2 years to hit the 4.1% target. That would be my assessment of the current budget. Yeah.
Ajay?
So in the past few years, government has taken blockbuster decisions, for example, cutting corporate tax rates, and many other decisions are taken to invite investment in India, FDI in India, and promoting local investments. This budget, I find the emphasis is on giving more stability benefit to the common man, farmers, women, and I think both are important. So this budget, I feel more emphasis is on the common man and farmers and women.
Right. Some money, not a blockbuster, but a good documentary, is it?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, I think the budget is no more the large economic event that it used to be a few years back. Progressively, its importance in the overall economic development has come down, because to me, what is more important is whatever the budget announced today, how quickly are those implemented? It's okay to have fewer announcements. We can't have blockbuster announcements coming on, year after year. But the announcements that have been made before the next budget comes, how do we implement all of those? So if 80% of the announcements in the budget are implemented before the next budget, comes, because between now and the next budget, we have hardly a period of 8 months or so. In that 8 months, if large number of these recommendations can be implemented, the legislation can be enacted in Parliament, steps can be taken to operationalize all of them, I think that will be, excellent. But overall, it is a good budget. It may not do a lot in terms of the hype involved around the budget, but in terms of the fundamental sectors it seeks to address, in terms of the areas that it seeks to address, including, for example, something like gold and silver customs duties coming down from 15% to 6%. I think overall it addresses sectors, it addresses the economy overall, and we have to now wait and see how these are implemented and how well they are implemented.
Great. I think in 8 months, it will be a good time to meet once again and take stock of how well this budget did. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us today. MS Money, Ajay Srivastava,